Rooster here with a new episode of Chordplay, and this is the Chords of Kool and the Gang. And I don't think I've had any requests for this band, but I'm putting this together mainly because, let's face it, Kool and the Gang is really cool. And they formed in New Jersey in 1964. Somewhere around 1973, they reached their peak as a funk band, kind of a jazzy funk band. And then they started to kind of fall in popularity or kind of slide a little bit. And then by the late 70s, they blew up again as like a disco pop band. 1980, of course, they scored their biggest hit, Celebration, which was huge, and they continued. So it's interesting because Kool and the Gang explored funk, jazz, soul, R&B, eventually disco, rock, blues, and pop, and a bunch of different styles of music. An essential band, for sure. So in the guitar department in Kool and the Gang's music, they've had a lot of member changes over the years, but most people point to the original guitarist Claydes Smith, also known as Clay Smith. Very interesting guitarist, late great funk and R&B and soul, hero. And it's interesting because Clay would lock into a certain riff or a certain song, and then he would almost recycle that riff in a kind of a slightly different way and make a variation. And we're going to see that in multiple, examples in this lesson. So it's kind of a cool, view of making, variations on a theme or a riff or an idea. Very interesting, and it pops up in Clay's music a lot. So the chord bass and rhythm guitar parts in this episode came from 3 classic Kool and the Gang albums, and I was a little overwhelmed putting this together because Kool and the Gang has released 26 studio albums, 4 live albums, 19 compilations, 76 singles. 11 of their albums were top 10, hit albums in the R&B charts, and 25 of their 76 singles were top 10 hits on the R&B singles chart. 9 of those songs were top 10 hits on the regular singles chart, which were huge. Definitely Celebration's their biggest hit. That song is not going to appear in this episode, mainly because it's such a famous and well-known song. So we're doing a deep dive, and I pulled out some really cool, guitar work and funky parts from Kool and the Gang. So if this sounds cool, buckle up, because here we go. Alright, with the opening, that's the song Kool and the Gang from Kool and the Gang's self-titled album from 1969. And it's this super hyperactive, really funky riff like this. And it actually starts with this. Think of that like a G9, like the funk chord right there. But it's really just G9 over B. We're not playing the root note there. And this is really interesting. Clay is basically changing the root note. So he's doing this. Like kind of slow. So he's moving that B to B flat, back to B, and then he's moving up to C. That's like an implied like D minor 7. Like that, right? So you're doing that. So there's like 2 hits occasionally, and then single, notes kind of in between the hits. Like so it's weird. Start with 2 hits, single note, then 2 hits there with that B note, and then that single C. And then you're going to basically grab that, and then it's kind of weird, like moving from that B to that C, and then you strum it. 2 single notes, and then a double hit on that 10th fret, and then a double hit on that 12th fret right there, like an implied, G9 to A9, but like that. And then right there, it's like a little part of like a B flat 5. And then you start the whole thing over again. And then right there after that B flat 5, then do it again. And after that runs its course, eventually you hit like this little part of A minor, and then B minor. And it's like a G over B, like that 70s kind of inversion. And then a D over A to a C over G, like that. And then you go right back to the riff. Really interesting guitar part, super busy and active. Definitely a great strumming workout for your funky kind of strums, and just a cool and the Gang riff. Okay, next up's the song Kool's Back Again from the first Kool and the Gang album, and this is what I was referring to with the opening when I was talking about Clay recycling riffs, because this is very similar to the song Kool and the Gang. And this riff also appears in the song The Gang's Back Again, which is also on the Kool and the Gang, first album. So there's 3 songs kind of recycling the same riff. Now, Kool's Back Again, we're doing this. Like that. So it's very similar to the song Kool and the Gang. It's just a little bit more relaxed. It's not quite as hyperactive and fast, but we're doing right? That same like G9, but now it's really just the B or the G, B, and high E, because now we're going to basically change that B flat to B. Then you're going to do that top part again. And then right there, this D to E on the G string. Go back to that partial, G9, and then you're going to basically play that F to G, and then right there, that triple 10, triple 12 right there, implied G9 to an A9, right? So if I go slow, you can see it's just a variation of the song Kool and the Gang, like this. And eventually it goes to that A minor. And now we're strumming it 4 times. Go to the B minor 4 times. Back to that A minor 4 times. And you got this big A minor 7 right there. Right? And then this little single note like D to E to that G. And it goes right back to the riff. So it's really interesting to see like a variation of the Kool and the Gang riff appearing in 2 other songs on the same album, and they all sound slightly different. Next up's the opening to the song Let the Music Take Your Mind. This is also from the first Kool and the Gang album, and it's something like this. Like that. So it starts with these octaves in B flat, the whole band, the horns, everybody's hitting this like that, and then move to the higher B flat octave and do it again, right? And then the riff that you hear, it's basically like an E flat 9, like think the funk chord right there, but once again Clay's not grabbing the root, he's just grabbing E flat 9 over G like that, and he's doing this like a quick slide, that F sharp to G. And you see he's basically grabbing like the top part funky, and then he's doing all this stuff on the bottom, right? Because right there you can see that C, B flat down to that F sharp. And then you do it again. And then right there that B flat, and you're kind of smear bending that F sharp. And you do all that again. Big thing, working on a lot of funk music like that, it's really going to improve your timekeeping, your rhythm skills, muting and scratching and all that stuff. It's great to work on, especially if you want to improve your rhythm. Next up's the main riff from the song Music Is the Message. This is from the album by the same name, Music Is the Message. I think that's 1970, or 71. But Anyway, this is really interesting because we're moving these thirds and then we're doing the funky hits with those partial ninth chords on top, like this. Like that. Something like that. So think of like an E major, like that E major, or that E and that G sharp, forming that E major third right there. So it's a major third and then two minors right there, like an F sharp minor, G, minor implied, like that. And then you're hitting that bar on the 7th fret on the G, B, and high E. And then you're going to basically start right there and grab that F sharp minor, and then you're going to slide that up chromatically to where you're up on that G sharp and that B note, and then grab this partial F sharp 9 on top, like that 9th fret on the G, B, and high E, right? And you're just cycling between those two. This one, and then right there. And then you do it again. Really interesting guitar part, and that's a funky song too. Next up's the riff from the song Funky Stuff. This is from the album Wild and Peaceful, which is on the wall right there. I think that's definitely my favorite Kool and the Gang album. Very famous riff here, something like this. Like that. So once again, partial, E9 chords. We're doing this partial E9, E flat 9 back to E9. And I think I started that with my index finger or something, but I actually prefer to play it like that with my third and middle finger. That way I'm kind of set up for the chord that follows that, and also that little chord slide at the end. So I'm really just using my first 3 fingers, but like that. So it's like partial E9, E flat 9 back to that E9, and then that, you could think of that like an E7 sus4 implied, but we're doing it like that. So we're doing, and then start that E9, E flat 9 thing again, and then right there. That's really interesting. It's like an implied A minor 7, and then that A minor 6, and then A minor. And we're just kind of sliding that G to F sharp, and then you're ending with that little part of A minor striad right there. Right? So really slow. And you do it all again. Timeless riff right there. Okay, next up's the riff from the song More Funky Stuff, and this is also from the album Wild and Peaceful, and this is yet another example of Clay making this funky kind of variation to a riff, like this. Something like that. So it's almost the same thing as Funky Stuff. We're doing that same, and then I'm hearing like this quick little hammer on right there, that C sharp to D. I don't think he did that in Funky Stuff, but I kind of hear it in More Funky Stuff, and it's a grace note. He's just very quickly moving like that. Right into that partial like E7 sus4 we had earlier, right? And then do that same chord hit, and you distinctly hear like a single D to that G note, and then you're doing that little crafty A minor 7, A minor 6, A minor kind of slide shift thing, like that. And then that's the song where it just starts vamping on the Hendrix chord, E7 sharp 9. That goes on forever. So if you're having trouble strumming that chord, play More Funky Stuff, and that's going to work out that E7 sharp 9 business. and definitely really a good like rhythm kind of strumming workout too. Okay, last but not least is Hollywood Swingin'. This is also from Wild and Peaceful, and this is a great example of what you'll typically find a funk guitarist play, like this sparse, rhythmic, guitar part. And earlier in this lesson, all the examples before this one, Clay was all over the place, scratching and sniffing and, really busy. But then this is really sparse, and it's kind of working off the bass part. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reproduce this with one guitar. I'm going to play the bass part, and then I'm going to start adding the chord hits from the guitar. And you can actually kind of arrange this like a solo guitar arrangement, kind of like this. So here's the bass part. That's what the bass plays over and over. And then you hear the guitar kind of fall in the cracks like this. Like that. So you hear those really strong bass hits. And then we are way up here. It's like an E7 over B. Like that. And then you hear that. That's the bass. And then right there the guitar is playing the top part of that E9. And then you hear the bass. The top part of that E9. And then that same. And then you do the top part of that E9 again. So it's that E7 over B once. Then you pause, top part of an E9, pause, do it again, then you do it again. Right, that kind of thing. But when you hear it with the bass part, it makes sense, where it's like, oh, that's what's going on. That kind of thing. And check out songs like that and see if you can actually kind of tackle playing the guitar part and the bass part together. Sometimes you can, obviously sometimes you can't do that, but that's an interesting challenge, and I love, seeing if I can do that. Like, hey, can I play both those parts at the same time? Alright, that's going to wrap this episode of Chordplay with this look at the Chords of Kool and the Gang. Definitely a very cool band. Clay was a cool guitarist for sure, and I'm a sucker for funk. I mean, I definitely am a rocker. I love metal and prog rock and a whole bunch of different styles of music. But funk and soul and R&B, it's a rhythmic challenge. There's always something unusual going on with like partial chords and slides and little hammer-ons and stuff like that, and the muted strumming and everything. It's a big challenge, And I notice I play differently. Like I fret things and grab things differently than, let's say, if I'm playing a rock song or a blues tune. Funk is real slippery and active and rhythmic and scratchy, where it's like, man, this is cool. But it's also a big challenge, and some of these songs are really hard to play, but they're fun once you lock in. It's like, man, I could play this song for an hour. And usually it's just really simple parts, kind of working together with the bass and the horns, the keyboard, and maybe a second guitarist. Definitely funk is really cool. So anyway, I wish you a happy Independence Day on July 4th, and definitely, Kool and the Gang with Celebration. It kind of seemed like, yeah, that's a good way to bring in, the 4th of July, holiday. Let's celebrate with some funky music. So anyway, leave some feedback and comments. Please subscribe to my lessons, and I'll be back before you know with more content and material. Thank you.